To the International Mentoring Community, All Things Mentoring Lounge, where we have discussions, dialogue, conversations. We might even get into a little bit of I didn't see it that way kind of conversations as well. And we invite you to join in through the chat function so that you can join us, give us your ideas, your insights, your information. It broadens our understanding and obviously enlivens your involvement in what we're doing. I'm Stephen Hobbs, and Doug Lawrence is joining me. We'll explain a little bit more about who we are. But as our tradition, just give you a sense of what we're going to be doing today here at the All Things Mentoring Lounge. We're going to take a look at the question, who is a mentor? What is a mentor? And what we're doing is getting at the basic building blocks for a foundation, or establishing the seed bed if we're going to grow a garden here. And we're going to take a look at it through 12 core essential statements or action outcome statements that we use here at the International Mentoring Community to be able to access a certification process that you can become involved with. And that certification process can lead you to a certificate of achievement concepts, in other words, certificate of concepts, and certificate of practice that allows you to say, hey, I've got the concepts, I know them. Practice, wow, I'm actually into the practice of it, and I am mentoring. And the International Mentoring Community, through its certification process, can recognize you, and we invite you to get involved with that as well. Now, along the way this morning, we're going to do a little bit of a connection between mentoring and coaching, because that seems to be one of the most searched connections between mentoring and something else, and mentoring and coaching. So we thought we would just sort of explain a little bit more about how we see that. And Doug and I are just going to get back and forth and have a little bit of fun here. And again, we invite you, if you want to ask us anything, there is the chat function, whether it's on YouTube or there on Facebook. And we look forward to getting involved. So with that, Doug, I think what we'll do is let's just introduce ourselves. So Doug, you want to just share a little bit about who you are with the International Mentoring Community?
Sure. I'm Doug Lawrence, and I am one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. I am the Director of Practice and Outreach, and I have my own company as well, Talent C, and it's involved in all things mentoring as well.
And I'm Stephen Hobbs. I'm the other co-founder, and I'm involved as Director of Education and Certification. So I do a little bit more of the background work to be able to guide you in getting your certification. Doug tends to be a little bit more upfront, or from a deep practice perspective, and therefore you get a really rounded way of understanding about mentoring, mentor, mentee, mentorship through your interactions with Doug and I. I have my own company, Wealth Movement, WELLTH, about well-being and well-living. Mentoring is one of the ways in which to encourage the movement of your well-being and your well-living. And Doug certainly gets a lot more into the mental health area of well-being and well-living, and into organization culture, where there's a lot of need for mentoring. I think it's one of the growing areas, one of the skills that people talk about, getting that up and into your way of managing and leading. So that's a bit of an introduction about who we are. Again, we're going to jump in. We're going to take a look at the topic of who is a mentor, what is a mentor. Again, this is a baseline understanding. We're not going to dive deep into these 12 essentials. This is more to give you an overview, give you a sense of, oh, okay, this is where we're going. This is what mentoring is about. So to be able to understand that, let's just take a look at the word mentor. Mentor is a person, and that person is in a committed, determined use of their time, effort, and money in support of the mentee. That's the other person that's there in the arrangement and connection. Now, the interesting thing is mentor is also the notion of the action to mentor, but we tend to use mentoring more in this way. And Doug, I'm just going to have you share with us what's the definition of mentoring we use at IMC, and then I'm going to come back and take a look at mentoring coaching.
So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where the mentor and mentee learn and grow together through personal and professional development.
Anything you want to unpack there that's important?
Well, the things that stand out for me are the aspect of the two-way trusted relationship, which gets us into sort of being somewhat contrary when you talk about reverse mentoring and things like that. So two-way trusted relationship definitely stands out as something that you need to think about. And the aspect of the mentor and the mentee both learning and growing together. And the other aspect is the personal and professional development. So what I typically tell people and how I operate my practice is I focus on the personal development first, and then we, the mentor and the mentee and myself, then we talk about their professional development, because, and the reason for that is because if there are personal growth challenges like self-esteem, self-confidence, self-doubt, all of those, they can actually become obstacles or barriers to being able to move forward with professional development.
Great. And again, this two-way trusted relationship, mentor-mentee, that's the terms that we will use. It's under the banner of mentoring, which is what Doug just shared with you, which is under the broader banner of mentorship. And mentorship is the notion of the discipline of the concepts and practices that are used in mentoring so that the mentor and mentee can do this learning and development and growth together in both personal and professional ways. So that's how we use those terms. I just want to come back to the notion of mentoring, because they are one of 12 educating approaches that are available to you in living your great life, your extraordinary life, in creating well-living workplaces, co-creating well-living workplaces, your involvement with the planet, for the world. So you have all of these options, but because it's the international mentoring community, I think you can figure out we are focused a little bit more on the mentoring, but we speak about what are sometimes called the wings of mentoring. One of the wings that I play with is facilitating and sometimes instructing. Doug will sometimes get into the coaching aspect of things with the mentoring and facilitating. And these are the wings of the other educating approaches. We will in the future be bringing forward the celebrant and weaver and navigator into this world of mentoring, because we're going to be expanding our appreciation, our understanding of what mentoring is about. And certainly as we start looking at what is going to be required and requested of mentors from the future. And certainly as we explore, Doug and I thought we would explore the notion of mentor as a paraprofessional, and that's certainly linking into the world of the mental health area. You can pick that up in other videos that we're sharing, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that point here in a few minutes, Doug, because I think it's worth bringing it out. Now, I also mentioned that the mentor is one of 12 educating approaches, and it's among 4 that we call the guide on the ride. And the other 3 are coaching, shifting, and counseling. So let me just spend a bit of time here with coaching. I mentioned earlier, or would explore that, because coaching is another educating approach, and it's sometimes we can, or what we use is, there's a connection, there's a competition, and there's a collaboration. Those are terms that we use in IMC to be able to connect these two forms of guides that are available to you. And from a mentor point of view, the mentor is in this connection with the mentee, in this relationship, this arrangement. And what they're doing is they're encouraging the mentee to ask questions of them, the mentor, because they're encouraging the mentee to tap into the lived experience of the mentor. Often what the coach is doing is the coach is asking a lot more questions of the coachee to get at this notion of the performance, the outcomes that the coachee is looking for, and the coach is there using tools and techniques to get that performance taken care of. And we think of coach is a bit more of getting the coachee involved in their learning, whereas the mentor-mentee is getting a lot more involvement to be able to this learning and development growth beyond what the topic is to actually deepen and enrich the mentee through a lot of different kinds of lenses. So it's a deeper, richer way of interacting with the person. So that means that the mentee is tapping into the lived experience of the mentor. And the mentor, when they learn the mentoring action outcomes, and we'll be talking about 12 of the essentials here a little bit later, it's a way for that person to show a practice that has meaning in bringing to mentor forward. Just like when you're coaching, so what we say in IMC is when you mentor, when you coach, coach. And if you're going to switch them around, then declare that, because you don't want to confuse the mentee or coachee at that point in time. And so this is an important declaration, and knowing is that the mentor is encouraging the mentee to ask questions of the mentee, and they're looking at the evolvement of the mentee. Coach is asking more questions of the coachee, and certainly getting them more involved in the performance that they're attempting to get at. Now, I bring this out is because from a mental health point of view, and this is where I'm going to get Doug to make comment about this, is that yes, you can mentor and coach in a mental health area, but sometimes you're not looking at, well, how do I help the coachee, in other words, the person who's bringing a mental health issue, and say, well, I'm going to coach you. It's sort of, for me, I'll use the word, it sort of grinds a little bit, doesn't quite fit, right? And that's where Doug certainly brings forward, well, I think the better term is, why don't we mentor in the mental health area? So I'll leave it there. Doug, you want to share anything here that makes that kind of connection for us?
Well, the connection is one thing, but coaching or mentoring, whichever one you decide that you're doing at that time point. But if you are working in the mental health space, you need to be able to define or demonstrate where those boundaries are, so that you don't cross over. And coaching is no exception to that rule. Is that if I'm working with somebody who has mental health challenges, then and I can't help them, I need to be able to refer that to someone that's better suited to be able to provide that healing journey. And that, that can be a counselor, that can be a social worker, that can be a psychologist, that can be a psychiatrist. But I think it's being humble enough to know when you've exhausted all that you should exhaust, and that you're that you're able to hand off or turn that over to somebody else. And I've just, recently had that very same, experience, where the person that I was talking with started to tell me everything that was going on. And I said, whoa, stop. I don't think I'm the right person. I can be part of your journey. I'll walk beside you, but I'm not the person that's going to help you with your healing. And you need to, you need to connect with some counselors, and like I mentioned, that whole list of people. And so coaching or mentoring, we need to be mindful of the boundaries that are there, and that we do not cross over those boundaries whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think for me is like when I think of the word coach, performance, I don't think of that necessarily as, being a key in a mental health issue and dealing with things. Whereas, being able to have the person as a learner, the mentee, and being able to ask you questions about, well, what's happened in your life and how might you bring some of that in. I think there's an edge in using the word like coach and performance in a mental health area. Any thoughts there?
Well, you would have to be extremely careful where you were dealing with performance related issues. You would need to understand whether or not there are any mental health issues that the person is dealing with that are impacting their performance in the organization. And I've seen that where, people have come forward and said, I really appreciate your mentoring me and all that sort of stuff. And as we start to have the conversation, we start to realize there's a number of things that we need to address that are more than likely having an impact on their ability to be an effective contributor to the organization.
For sure. So I think what Doug and I are attempting to share here with you is words matter. The combinations of words matter. The language that you use, the ideas, the concepts, the practices you're using have to align with the educating approach that makes sense. We're emphasizing mentoring, so like we have our bias on this video. We're not saying any of the others, oh, you can't do them in a mental health area. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'll let me add that to it. But it's just paying attention to the intention that you're setting in terms of this connection, this arrangement that you're setting up. I have something similar because I'm really interested in the nature-informed world, where you're using nature as the educator, and sometimes there's nature-informed adventure therapy, where people are going out of doors and in a similar way dealing with different kinds of living issues. Some of them could be mental health, some of them could be other kinds of issues that a person's feeling, and they're feeling, and that they are using nature as a way to inform them. And so again, I share the same thing. Is coaching the approach, mentoring the approach, instructing, facilitating? Again, there's lines around, bringing something like counseling in, unless you've got your respective license or your designation to go with it. So I'm hoping is that what we're doing here is just emphasizing that mentoring, when you mentor, you mentor. When you coach, you coach. Is it appropriate for the situation and the learning and the decisions that are required? That's what we're attempting to get to. So Doug, I think what will help is maybe jump into the 12 core essentials, all right, that answer the question, who's a mentor, what is a mentor, to establish sort of this, the foundation seedbed. Sound good?
Sound good.
All right. So for a person to serve and thrive as a mentor, here are 12 essentials that will get you going. And again, we're not going to dive into them in such a way as that this sort of feels like a workshop. This is more about us sharing, bringing awareness to these, so you gain a perspective. All right, that's what we're looking at it. So the first two have to do with terms and concepts. And what's important here is to define the terms and concepts and agree on these terms and concepts. And we've gone over some of them already: mentor, mentee, mentoring, mentorship, mentoring arrangement, mentoring relationships, connection. When you get into mentoring, understand what your definition of mentoring, as Doug gave you the International Mentoring Community one. Understand what those terms and concepts are about, so that you do have this baseline upon which to, in a sense, build a foundation, or to prepare the seed bed to be able to grow what it is that you're doing. If you go back and listen, we went through each of the terms. And if not, certainly go out, explore. We have videos on the International Mentoring Community that define those terms. You can go to the dictionary, you can do Google searches, but really go at getting what you define those terms and concepts. But here's an important piece. When you engage with your mentee, make sure that you define those terms and concepts with the mentee as well, because they may have a slight variation, and you want to be able to get that out so that both of you are in the same songbook, the same rhythm of the song, but one of you may be an alto, one of you might be a soprano, okay? I hope that that metaphor works. It would sort of seem counterintuitive to be in a songbook and the mentor is in song A and the mentee's in song D, and you're trying to sing the songs together. It just won't work. Unless, of course, that's a new way in which to go about mentoring. I don't think it would work, but again, I'll leave that to you, dear learner who's listening into what's going on. Anything about the terms and concepts component that you would want to add, Doug?
No, I think we've covered that off.
Okay. Well, one of the next things that people will bring up, well, what are the types of mentoring? Where are they? And one of the ones that I like to encourage, and because I'm a writer of books, and I know Doug has written books as well, is you can actually look at a book as a mentor, and you're diving into the lived experience of that person. But what are some of the other types of mentoring that you wanted to bring forward, Doug?
Well, there's definitely group mentoring or mentoring circles. It's called a number of different things, but that's basically where you have a number of people, and I facilitate a session like that where a number of people come together and we talk about different experiences, or basically that lived experiences that they've encountered over the past week or since the last time we met, and how might we deal with that a little bit differently if we encounter a similar thing the next time, and kind of go through that. So that's the group mentoring aspect. The other one that I've noticed is quite prevalent is mentoring from a training perspective. So if an organization has implemented a business solution, they will then get mentors to mentor specifically in relation to that solution that they've implemented. So it's a training based mentorship that does take place. And then the third one, which is more of what is it not, is reverse mentoring, that you see that quite often listed, on websites if you do searches and stuff like that. And reverse mentoring to me it doesn't exist. I prefer to not use that term, because the definition of reverse is going backwards, and actually reverse mentoring is covered off by the definition that we gave at the beginning of the show, which was the two-way trusted relationship where mentor-mentee learn and grow together through personal and professional development. There's nothing about going backwards in that statement whatsoever.
Right. And when we share with you about the types of mentoring, and there are others, and you can certainly go out and look for them, is that from an international mentoring community perspective, when we're doing the certification, it's about the knowledge, skills, and attitude of mentoring, not about the discipline from which you come from. So if I'm a project manager, we're not saying we're going to certify you as a project manager, right? It's about the use of mentoring as you serve as a project manager, and again, in all the different other areas, right? But at the same time, there's something I think that Doug always shares around, don't get caught up that if I'm a project manager, then my mentoring can only be about my lived experience that people can tap into. Because how do you talk about it, Doug, is that you don't have to have the discipline when you mentor someone. You want to share that that
Yeah.
insight with people?
Yeah, and I encountered that earlier this week where I was approached to mentor a business person, and in his application, he had stated that he didn't want to be mentored by somebody that did not have industry specific experience. And so I went back to the program organizer and I said, when it comes to how I approach things, having industry specific experience is a nice to have. It's not a need to have. And I can give lots of examples working with entrepreneurs. I've worked with people in the food services industry. I've worked with people in the IT industry. Excuse me. I've worked with people in communications and public speaking. So I've worked with people in a number of different genres, and I do not have industry specific experience.
Right. And sometimes it actually may be a detriment. It may actually get in the way. And I know that, is when I'm starting to do, like for my personally, is I don't often mentor entrepreneurs. That's not what I would do, but I'm mentoring people who are looking at, well, how do I use nature informed? I want to be a better educator in that. I can mentor in that, but not so much about the activities of, well, how do I set up this as a business? How do I hang the shingle out? And sometimes people will come to me and ask, well, how do I start a business using mentoring? And I go, okay, here's some basic ideas, but I'm not the best person to interact with you around that. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll offer it over to Doug, or there's other people I know who could serve in much better ways. So you've got to discern that as you are moving forward in mentoring. Now, I'm really great, like Doug, is the terms and concepts, or what we often will call the inspired standards and wise practices of mentoring. That's what I am really great at, being able to share those, bring those out for someone. Doug deepens that practice, all right, when he gets into them. But that's where we're coming from. So we're spending just a little bit more time here, just emphasizing something that sort of goes like this. Just because you think you can doesn't mean you should. Right? Just because you have been mentored or you think you know how to mentor, just take a step back and really consider what that means, both from a terms and concepts and practices point of view, right? And figure out the sort of the type of mentoring that you want to do before you hang your shingle out and then jump into it in terms, because you might find, contrary, as you might find it, actually, it might be better to become a coach. Again, these are things, and we're just sort of laying it out. These are the things to take into consideration. Another area that I think people ask about around who's a mentor, or what is a mentor, there's many benefits that go with mentoring. And one of the ones that I so enjoy about it is that I love to learn what I educate. So when I'm mentoring, I learn so much from the mentee because of these collaborative conversations that we're having. And that for me is such a deep benefit that I'll go into it with those eyes, right? And that commitment to be able to learn so much from that person. Another thing is that the benefit of mentoring is the mentoring and this terms and concepts and practices, because I can deepen it. Because over the years, when I first started, hey, I tripped over my feet. probably more times than I would like to think about, because I often mixed coaching in with it until I went, oh, hang on a minute, mentoring, coaching. When I mentor, I mentor. When I coach, I coach. And that's how I came to understand that I'm not a coach, I'm a mentor. And that was a benefit for me, is that I got such clarity that I was then consistent in my approach. I just thought, Doug, you got one or two benefits you want to share?
Yeah, I do. I want to come at it from sort of the aspect of benefits on the personal level first. So, say from a person or an employee or whatever, that what I have seen is that there has been, for people that are being mentored or going through the mentoring process, there is an elevated sense of self-esteem, self-confidence that results in performance, um, enhanced performance capabilities, and that for for that particular individual, as well as it also helps increase their engagement in the organization as well. So that's the personal side. The professional side is sort of, it replicates some of the benefits, excuse me, that you see on the personal side. One of which is the engagement aspect, is that the organization as a whole now becomes more engaged with the employees, and so it starts to benefit from that perspective. And then culture, one of the things I always say, the desired state to be is to have an organization where you've implemented a mentoring program, and it becomes a way of life within the organization, so that people know when they get up in the morning and come to work, they are probably going to learn something that's going to benefit them on a personal and professional basis. The other one that really stands out is that on the professional side, is that because employees are involved in a mentoring program and more engaged and all of that, that the organization sees a reduced turnover rate than what they typically have had perhaps before the mentorship program.
Yeah, okay, so that gives a few more to you. Again, you put in a search term such as benefits mentoring, you'll get lots and lots of different angles from that perspective. We just wanted to share a few. But I just had a message came in on my WhatsApp. Someone's listening and they know me, and they said, well, isn't mentoring all free? And that happens to be the next next point that I was going to bring up, this notion of, is mentoring free or paid? And because we've been mentioning shingles, right, putting out your mentoring shingle, and it sort of is all over the map in some ways, because a lot of times when you think about youth mentoring, and that's where you might use a type of mentoring called peer mentoring, where you got youth mentoring youth kind of idea, or younger adults mentoring the teenagers. A lot of that's not paid. A lot of that is volunteer, and they see it as in a sense of sharing and giving back. But what it does, it benefits the mentor at that, because they're learning about educating, they're learning more about themselves this two-way trusted, all the way up to, you can make a great living being a mentor. If you go to LinkedIn, there are people who've got the word mentor in their titles, and I'm thinking they're not doing it for free, that they're actually charging, and some of them could be charging $1,000 an hour, $2,000 an hour. So that's what we mean about the shingles. So there is a connection. I know that I actually charge for mentoring, and I also do some mentoring for free. Doug, I think you do the same thing, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So again, free and paid, it can go whichever way that you decide it to be. So I'm hoping, dear friend, that you're just when you asked that, we just shared some insights for you. Oh, they said yes. So that's great. So the other thing, if you are going to get into this mentoring arrangement connection, you also have to know when to say no. It's not always, yes, I'll mentor. Sometimes you've got to decline it. You'd like to think you'd accept them all, but sometimes you got to decline it. Do you want to share anything about that, Doug? Because again, Doug has a deeper practice. He's doing a lot more mentoring than I am at this moment because I'm doing a lot more writing and getting some other things set up. What is this notion of accepting and declining a mentoring arrangement?
Well, I somewhat touched on that where I talked about, being asked to mentor a business person, and in their application, they had made a statement with regards to wanting to have a mentor who had industry specific experience. That's one that I've gone back to be able to say, that's putting me in a negative position already going out the gate. And so go back to the business person and ascertain if that's a showstopper or not. And part of me is sort of saying, it doesn't really matter what the answer is going to be. I probably will still decline because, I don't know what's taking place from the conversation that's going on in behind the scenes and that. So, that's definitely one. And I've been partway into a mentoring relationship where I was not able to develop the trusted relationship that I thought I was going to be able to. And I had to walk away from that particular, relationship and say, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work. And let's see if we can get you matched with somebody else that might be a better fit.
Yeah, that happened to me once. And the person just wasn't committed to showing up and doing some of the things. So I had to then decline it. I had to close it down. And I had the person meet someone else who was a better fit. And the story that came back was the person that I was interacting with said, they used the term, there was a little bit of a chemistry and it wasn't quite catalyzing. It was sort of banging up against each other. And I didn't understand what it was, but I will honor what that person requested at that point in time. That's what's more important, right? And it's just one of those ones that I've got filed back here somewhere, and every once in a while I go, what happened there? I never did get the full answer, but at the same time, I am more than pleased that the person actually got all of the other benefits from interacting with the other person, and I was able to facilitate that movement. So that's again is knowing how to accept, decline, how to move people through. But this notion of self and self-concept, that's another area. And you've talked about it, using from a mentee point of view. But just share with us your perspective of self-concept as a mentor. And I think we know of phrases like know thyself, right? We've heard those in many ways. As a mentor, the more you know yourself, the more that you can know others. But Doug, in terms of helping someone who's going to be a mentor understand their self-concept, what would you share with them?
Well, the big thing for me is going into a prospective mentoring relationship is that I, as a mentor, need to be whole. And by being whole, I mean I need to have, in my own mind, identified any baggage that I may be bringing into the relationship. I need to be able to define what that is and how am I going to manage or cope with that in getting into a mentoring relationship. But the whole thing about self and self-concept is that the stronger you are as a person, the stronger and the deeper and richer you're going to be able to go as a mentor in that mentoring relationship.
And it's also what you're exploring with the mentee. And you've explained this as well already around how the person presents themselves from a self point of view. So knowing it and seeing it in yourself as a mentor and learning about that from a mentee point of view, you might find something as a mentor because of your interaction with the mentee from a self-concept that can be of great assistance to you, right? And one of the ways that I look at it is sometimes people have that self-doubt, right, that gets in the way, or they might think, well, I know everything as a mentor, and therefore, they actually get themselves into trouble because they may have some ignorance about some aspect of mentoring because they've never explored it, Or there are mentors from a self-concept get into complacency issues, and they just sort of sit back in their chair. You can sort of see it sometimes. That's why I came up a little more forward, is mentor going back into their chair and thinking, oh yeah, well, I'll just talk about it. Anything there that you would want to mention because of your own experience, Doug?
No, not off the top of my head. No.
Yeah, but from your deep practice point of view, you pick up on the body language and how that all comes about, because that gives you some clues into the self-concept component of being a mentor, does it not?
Well, it does, and we did a video on this on mentoring and neuroscience, and I'm finding the more deeper that I go in exploring that to include that in my next book, I'm finding that, you know, the whole aspect of body language and all of that stuff from a neuroscience perspective is
Yeah.
critical for us as mentors to be able to, number one, understand that, and number two, know how to be able to use that so that we can help the person that we're mentoring, our mentee, so that we can help them, you know, continue to continuously grow as a person, but also as from a workplace perspective as well.
Yeah, in that video, we talk about behavior better, and then making that connection. So if you're going to be a mentor, then the behavior you exhibit has to allow it to be better for you and for the mentee, two-way trusted connection. And that's why we did that one on the neurosciences, right? Is to be able to remind us of how important that is. Well, there's I think what we'll do is we'll move on. We got 5 more to go of these essentials, okay?
Yeah.
And the next one is really about manage your communication skills, right? Which means actually have a practice of your communication skills and making them effective and relevant to what's going on at the time. And I think of communication as the notion of community, and cation, flip the C around of the A and you get action. So it's community and action. So when you're mentoring and you're using communication, it's about this community, this connection that you have, this arrangement, all right? And you're looking at the action, and therefore the communication has to foster, right? Fashion in some ways, nurture, right? The notion of the conversation you're having. And that's why we, Doug and I will often use the term collaborative conversation. Collaborative coming from the place of, yeah, I have to be assertive as the mentee has to be assertive, but we both have to be cooperative. And that's how we get to a collaborative and this notion of a conversation. Any thoughts on the communication angle?
You know, the thing that I typically speak about is the ability to listen, but also to hear what it is that your mentee is saying. And that's really important when it comes to working in the mental health space, because you have to know when it's time for you to kind of zip it, and when it's time for you to, you know, to be able to maybe say something or offer one of your lived experiences. But other than that, listening and hearing is really important. And there's a number of other things that I typically, you know, will touch on, like, you know, listening for trigger words in the conversation, and, you know, looking at it from the aspect of what's the words I'm looking for? The main thing are the listening and hearing and the trigger words. Watch for deflections in the conversation, because then that may signal that that's an area you may want to kind of probe a little bit deeper and stuff like that. So without getting into it too much more and taking this a lot deeper, those are some that really stand out right at the forefront.
Yeah, and 2 of the essentials, the phrasing we use is listen consciously and share responsibly.
Yeah.
So the consciously is when you listen, you learn, and the share responsibly is where you share, you educate. And that is really important for when you serve as a mentor and to thrive as a mentor. Sometimes we talk to mentors and they go, well, I just want to get through what we're doing and then I can move on, right? And they may have become a little bit jaded. And as soon as I hear that, I'm going, well, you're no longer, in a sense, thriving, you're just surviving. And that's going to show up because guess what the mentee's doing? They're listening consciously and sharing responsibly. And if they're not being met in that two-way trusted way, then that's where things start to crumble and collapse. And that's not a great way to do things. So that's just taking on what Doug was saying and just adding that those are two very particular ones that we use in the action outcomes for the essentials of mentoring. There's two others that are linked to the word continuous that Doug and I wanted to share with you. One is the notion of manage continuous learning, and the other one is to manage continuous improvement. So you might go, oh, aren't they the same thing? In some ways, yes, but the way that we look at it is continue to learn, to go out into the approach that you can develop, all right, to be able to learn different things about mentoring, because then you can use what you've learned to be able to improve. Because the beauty here is, and I'm leaning in on this one, all right, is sometimes you might learn something and you go, you know what? While that might have been used by someone, it doesn't really apply to me. I don't think I'm going to use that one. I'm not going to use that to improve my practice, okay? And a good example of that is that reverse language that Doug talked about earlier. That's a classic example for me. Someone comes to me and starts saying, well, like I'd like to start establishing this reverse mentoring in the business I have. And like Doug, I'll do a big swallow, which gives me a little bit of a break before I come back and I go, that's not the kind of learning I want to share, because that's not how I want to improve what you're doing. And therefore, I open up another line of thought, another line of presentation to be able to bring that forward. But this notion of continuous learning, being there and learning what it is to mentor, to thrive as a mentor, this continuous improvement, what are ways in which you can improve it? And it could be even how you write your notes in your logbook, right? And improving that, all right? I've learned how to create a logbook, but how do I improve my entries in my logbook? That's what we're attempting to get here. Anything about this continuous learning, continuous improvement, Doug?
Well, you've touched on pretty much everything. The for me, what stands out is that, you know, the continuous learning is that would be me going out and doing, say, for example, a bunch of reading and research and stuff and exploring different things, and then bringing that back and saying, okay, how can I take what I've just what I've learned, how can I take and put that into my practice, and how can I maybe change things up a little bit so that the deeper, richer mentoring experience that you had with me yesterday will definitely be different than the one you're going to have tomorrow or the day after, simply because I have taken that learning and I've put that into practice.
Yeah. So of the 12 that we've talked about, just some of the key words is, you know, what are the terms and concepts of mentoring, right? And mentoring arrangement, mentoring connection, the types and benefits of mentoring, serving as a mentor, this notion of free and paid, how to accept and decline a mentoring request, diving into your own self-concept, what are the communication skills you would like to use, such as, you know, listen consciously and share responsibly, and digging into continuous learning, continuous improvement. You can use those key words like I've just shared there, put mentoring with them, go out to Google and find things. You can go out to Google Scholar and find things. One of the things I will encourage is go find some mentors and have a conversation with them about mentoring so that you get what we call the background conversation, to get into how does it all weave together. Because sometimes, like if you go to Google, you might get the foreground conversation. but you may not get the nuances of what it's about. And that's why Doug and I, we produce these videos. We talk about the different ways in which to look at it, the different means that you can put into play, the tips, tools, techniques, and technologies, right, that are there, that have a way of helping you out so that you can acknowledge, advance, and amplify mentoring. We're doing what we can to bring that forward, and that's why this is video 1 of a 7-part series, all right? And what we're using is the action outcomes that we employ in the certification process. So that's where we're going with it. So yeah, you can go to Google, but have conversations with the mentors and the mentees. Do your own deeper reflection, right? Take that journal and go sit under a tree. Okay, my nature informed is coming out in me, okay? Go to a garden and just sit down. Go to a coffee shop and think through it, right? You can take the 12 statements that are here and write out your own responses to them, okay, in your journal, because they're in the show more notes below, and see what you can do with them. So that's a way of taking a look at it, okay? So with that, Doug, I think that what we'll do is let's take this to a close. And just remind everyone is, what is a mentor? Who is a mentee? We've attempted to bring that forward today, and taking a look at some of the core words that are here, and shared a little bit about the connection, competition, and collaboration between mentor and coaching, mentor and coach as well. So with that, Doug, I think as we typically do, you get to take us out. I brought us in, you get to take us out. Once I know Doug has shared what he needs to share, and certainly welcome you back to next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain here on YouTube, also on the mental health page, Mentoring and Mental Health on Facebook. So with that, Doug, you want to take us out? When I know you're done, I'll just say take care, and I'll close off the stream.
So I hope that our listeners today now have a greater appreciation for what mentoring is and what mentoring can do for you and for the organization that you work in. And it's extremely important that you listen to the video once again and be able to get that, because this video is how I would describe it, is the first paving stone of 7 that you need to go through in order to have a bigger picture all around of the whole mentoring experience, deeper and richer. So I encourage you once again to listen to this video again and get ready for the second paving stone that you're about to get next week.
Great. Take care, everyone.